The bitter taste wasn't in my imagination after all. When you've spent your life building something real, the greatest danger isn't strangers. It's those who've earned the keys to your kingdom. Tonight, I discovered the woman sleeping beside me for 6 years planned to make me disappear by morning. Behind the floorboards beneath our bed lay cash, fake passports, and photos of other men who looked disturbingly like me. Men who had vanished without a trace, their lives and legacies erased by the same hands that caressed me to sleep each night. My accounting ledgers never lied, and neither did the evidence before me. This retired accountant still had one final audit to perform, and Sarah's deadly ledger was about to be balanced. David Mitchell gazed out the bay window of his San Francisco Victorian home, watching fog roll over the Golden Gate Bridge. At 65, retirement had finally given him the time to appreciate these quiet moments. The morning light caught his wedding band as he adjusted his reading glasses, a small smile crossing his face. Finding Sarah after losing Margaret to cancer had seemed like an unexpected second chance, a blessing he never thought possible after 40 years with his first wife. "Coffee's ready," Sarah called from the kitchen, her voice warm and familiar. "I made those cranberry scones you like." 6 years of marriage to Sarah had created new routines that comforted him. She handled the garden and cooking. He managed their finances and home repairs. Their partnership felt balanced, comfortable. She was 15 years younger, but the age gap had never mattered. Her patience with his methodical nature, what Margaret had lovingly called his accountant's precision, only endeared her to him more. "Thanks," David said, accepting the mug with a nod. The scones were arranged on Margaret's old blue plate, the one survivor from her grandmother's china set. Sarah had always been thoughtful about incorporating pieces of his previous life rather than erasing them. "Benjamin confirmed he's visiting next week. It'll be good to see him." Sarah smiled, touching his shoulder as she passed. "Your old work friend. That's wonderful. I'll make up the guest room. The blue sheets, right? The ones he liked last time?" Her attention to detail matched his own, one of the many reasons they'd connected so quickly after meeting at a widow and widowers support group. Sarah had lost her husband to a car accident 2 years before they met, or so she'd told him. They'd bonded over shared grief, finding comfort in each other's understanding. The day passed pleasantly enough. David volunteered at the Senior Center's financial literacy program, helping retirees navigate predatory investment schemes, an irony that would strike him only later. Sarah worked her part-time shift at a local gallery, selling artwork to tourists and wealthy locals. By evening, they settled into their routine, a quiet dinner, the news, and Sarah brewing David's nightly chamomile tea. "Just the way you like it," she said, setting the steaming cup beside him, "with honey and just a hint of lemon." Her smile reached her eyes, crinkling the corners in a way he'd always found endearing. David took a sip and frowned slightly. That bitter aftertaste again. He'd noticed it the past few weeks. Not overwhelming, just wrong. A discordant note in an otherwise perfect melody. "Something the matter?" Sarah asked, watching him closely. "No, just thinking I might need to buy a different brand of tea. This one tastes off, bitter." Sarah's smile never wavered. "Your taste buds change as you age. Margaret must have noticed that too." She settled beside him on the sofa, her flowered dress arranged neatly. "My father complained about the same thing before he passed. Food just didn't taste right anymore." "Perhaps," David murmured, taking another sip despite the bitterness. Mentioning Margaret never bothered Sarah, another quality he appreciated. Some women might have resented the ghost of a 40-year marriage, but Sarah had always encouraged him to keep Margaret's memory alive. Within 20 minutes, an unusual drowsiness overtook him. Not the gentle fatigue after a long day, but a heavy, dragging sensation that seemed to pull him downward. His eyelids felt weighted, his thoughts sluggish and disconnected. "You look exhausted," Sarah observed, setting aside her book. "Let's get you to bed. You've been pushing yourself too hard with that volunteer work." David struggled to respond, his tongue feeling oddly thick. Sarah helped him up, her arm around his waist as they climbed the stairs. His vision blurred at the edges, his feet moving automatically, while his mind fought against the encroaching darkness. His last conscious thought was how strange it felt to be so utterly drained without warning. Morning arrived with a dull headache and lingering grogginess that coffee couldn't dispel. David blinked at the ceiling, trying to gather his scattered thoughts. Something felt wrong. He glanced at the empty space beside him. Sarah was already up, the scent of bacon wafting up the stairs. Pushing himself upright, David noticed his office door across the hall stood slightly ajar. He distinctly remembered closing it the night before. Frowning, he crossed to his office. Nothing seemed obviously disturbed, but the room felt different. His passport, stored in the top desk drawer, was now behind other documents rather than in front, where he always kept it. The drawer itself was closed slightly differently than his habitual precision would allow. The angle was off by perhaps half an inch, negligible to most, but glaring to someone who had spent 40 years ensuring financial ledgers balanced to the penny. The computer monitor was positioned at a slightly different angle too. David always aligned it perfectly with the edge of the desk, a habit that had amused both Margaret and Sarah over the years. Now it was rotated perhaps 5 degrees clockwise. David stood very still, cataloging these small discrepancies with growing unease. The drowsiness, the bitter tea, the moved items. Each individual element could be dismissed: aging taste buds, normal fatigue, forgetfulness. Together, they formed a pattern that the accountant in him couldn't ignore. Later that morning, he found himself staring at his phone, Benjamin's number on the screen. His finger hovered over the call button. What would he even say? "I think my wife is drugging my tea and going through my things while I sleep." It sounded paranoid, ridiculous, the kind of conspiracy theory that lonely old men developed when their minds began to slip. Instead, he sent a text, "Looking forward to your visit. We have a lot to catch up on." Innocuous words that couldn't raise suspicion if Sarah happened to see his phone, but Benjamin would recognize the formality as unusual for their decades-long friendship. The response came quickly. "Everything okay? You sound like you're dictating to your secretary again." Benjamin had always teased David about his precise texting habits, complete with punctuation and proper grammar. David hesitated, then replied, "All fine. Just eager to see an old friend." He couldn't put his suspicions in writing, not yet. Not until he had more evidence than bitter tea and moved objects. That evening, David watched Sarah prepare his tea with new awareness. Her movements were practiced, efficient. Nothing suspicious in her actions. Yet when she turned away to fetch the honey, he noticed how she kept her body between him and the cup. A small thing, perhaps meaningless. "Here you are," she said, setting down the tea with that same warm smile that had comforted him for 6 years. "Drink it while it's hot." David took the cup, returning her smile while something cold settled in his stomach. "Thank you, dear. What would I do without you?" The words felt hollow now, tainted by suspicion. Yet as Sarah curled beside him on the sofa, discussing an exhibition at her gallery, David found himself wondering if he was simply becoming paranoid. Could grief, age, and retirement be catching up with him, making him question the one good thing that had happened after losing Margaret? He sipped the tea sparingly, watching Sarah over the rim of his cup. Whatever was happening in his home, David Mitchell was determined to find the truth, even if it destroyed the life he thought he'd rebuilt. In accounting, discrepancies were never random, numbers didn't lie, and patterns always revealed truth with enough scrutiny. Throughout his career, David had uncovered fraud through the smallest inconsistencies, decimal points in the wrong place, timestamps that didn't align, signatures with subtle variations. He applied this same principle as he began documenting the anomalies in his home. He purchased a small notebook that fit perfectly in his wallet, choosing one with graph paper for precise notation. Each night before bed, he recorded the exact position of items, his passport, financial documents, the angle of his desk drawer, the position of his computer mouse. He used a ruler to measure distances from the desk edge to each item, noting the figures with the same precision he once applied to corporate audits. Each morning revealed the same result, small but unmistakable disturbances. The mouse moved 2 centimeters. His financial folder rearranged, the insurance policies now on top rather than his investment statements. His computer showed browser history he hadn't created, searches for bank transfer protocols, power of attorney documentation, life insurance claim procedures. "Getting forgetful in my old age," he commented casually to Sarah over breakfast, watching her reaction. "Could have sworn I put those insurance documents away yesterday." "You did," Sarah replied without hesitation. "I was looking for the contact information for our homeowner's policy. Remember that crack in the guest bathroom ceiling? I wanted to check if repairs would be covered." She buttered her toast with steady hands, her explanation ready and reasonable. Too ready, perhaps. Too smooth. 3 weeks into his documentation, David made a disturbing discovery. Searching for aspirin in Sarah's bathroom drawer, he found a prescription bottle labeled Zaleplon, hidden beneath her toiletries. The name meant nothing to him, but a quick internet search on his phone revealed it was a powerful sedative, one that could easily be disguised in a bitter cup of tea. The prescription was in Sarah's name, from a doctor David had never heard of, dated just 4 months earlier. The dosage instructions read, "Take one as needed for insomnia." Reviewing his calendar, David realized the unusual exhaustion had begun approximately 3 months ago, coinciding with Sarah's suggestion of nightly tea to help you sleep better as you adjust to retirement. "You seem restless at night," she had said then, her concern apparently genuine. "My mother always swore by chamomile with honey. It's natural, not like those sleeping pills doctors push on seniors." The growing evidence left him cold, but he needed confirmation before confronting her. That night, he pretended to drink his tea, secretly emptying it into a potted plant when Sarah stepped out to answer a phone call. He made a show of yawning, mumbling about feeling tired. "The tea really does help," he said, allowing his speech to slur slightly. "Don't know why I resisted for so long." Sarah smiled, squeezing his hand. "You've always been stubborn about some things. Come on, let's get you to bed early tonight." Lying motionless with eyes nearly closed, David watched through his lashes as Sarah tested his unconsciousness, calling his name softly, then touching his shoulder, finally pinching his arm with enough force that he had to concentrate to prevent himself from flinching. When he didn't respond, she waited another 20 minutes, checking her watch periodically before slipping out of bed. She moved silently to his office. David heard drawers opening, the soft tap of computer keys, the printer humming briefly. She returned 30 minutes later, sliding back into bed without disturbing him. The confirmation left him nauseous, but he maintained his steady breathing until morning. Benjamin's arrival couldn't come soon enough. They met at a diner miles from David's home, one they'd frequented during their accounting firm days, when complex audits required private discussion away from office politics. "You've lost weight," Benjamin observed immediately, his eyes sharp beneath steel-gray hair. "And you look like hell." David had always appreciated his friend's directness. For 30 years, Benjamin had been his sounding board, the person who balanced David's cautious precision with practical insight. Where David saw spreadsheets and procedures, Benjamin saw people and motivations, a combination that had made them exceptional forensic accountants and even better friends. "I need to tell you something," David said quietly after the waitress had brought their coffee and retreated. "It's going to sound crazy." Benjamin's expression grew serious. "Try me." David explained everything: the bitter tea, the drowsiness, the disturbed belongings, the hidden medication, the nightly invasions of his office. With each detail, Benjamin's frown deepened. "You think I'm paranoid," David concluded, stirring his untouched coffee. "No." Benjamin set down his coffee cup firmly. "I've known you 30 years. If you think something's wrong, something's wrong." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You're the most methodical man I've ever met. If you say items are being moved, they're being moved." The immediate validation nearly undid David's careful composure. He hadn't realized how desperately he needed someone to believe him, to confirm he wasn't simply becoming a confused old man. "I should have said something sooner," Benjamin continued, his expression troubled. "I never felt right about how quickly Sarah appeared after Margaret died." 6 months is awfully fast to meet someone and get married. You never mentioned that. You were happy for the first time since losing Margaret. I didn't want to ruin that based on just a feeling. Benjamin's expression darkened. "But this isn't just a feeling. This is evidence. Specific evidence of something deliberate." They discussed options. Benjamin, who had transitioned from accounting to security consulting after retirement, offered resources. "I can get cameras installed so small she'd never notice. We need to find out what she's really doing, what she's looking for." "No," David said firmly. "I can't risk alerting her. I need to handle this myself first." Benjamin grudgingly agreed, but insisted on staying in a hotel rather than David's guest room as originally planned. "That way we can communicate freely. But David, be careful. If she's drugging you, this goes beyond snooping." "This is dangerous." The warning echoed in David's mind as he returned home to Sarah's welcoming smile and the scent of his favorite beef stew simmering on the stove. That evening he decided to attempt a direct approach, carefully framed to gauge her reaction. "I've been finding things moved in my office," he mentioned casually over dinner. "My passport wasn't where I left it. Some documents rearranged. Have you been looking for something?" Sarah's expression shifted to gentle concern so quickly it seemed rehearsed. "I haven't touched anything, David. You've been so forgetful lately. Remember last week when you couldn't find your glasses and they were on your head the whole time? That's not the same. And the week before, you insisted we had plans with the Hendersons, but it was actually this week." Her voice remained soft, caring, each example delivered with affectionate concern rather than accusation. "I'm a little worried about you, to be honest. My father started having memory issues around your age. It started with small things, misplaced keys, forgotten appointments, but we didn't take it seriously until it was quite advanced." The subtle implication hit its mark. David felt a flicker of doubt. Was he overreacting? Imagining things? The uncertainty must have shown on his face, because Sarah reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "Maybe I should schedule a checkup," he conceded, watching her closely. "I think that's wise," Sarah said, her relief appearing genuine. "I can make the appointment with Dr. Levine. He specializes in cognitive health for seniors." David nodded, retreating from the conversation, but the interaction confirmed his suspicions. Her deflection was too practiced, too convenient, transforming his legitimate concerns into symptoms of cognitive decline. It was masterfully done, raising doubts not just about his observations, but about his mental faculties. Later that evening, he overheard Sarah on the phone in the garden, speaking in hushed tones that carried through the partially open kitchen window. "We need to move the timeline up," she was saying, her voice entirely different from the warm, caring tones she used with him. This voice was clipped, professional, cold. "He's noticing things. No, I'm handling it. It'll be done before they arrive." David slipped back inside, his heart pounding. Sarah wasn't just invading his privacy, she was planning something. And whatever it was, she intended to complete it before Benjamin's visit. His decision crystallized. Tonight, he would discover what Sarah was hiding, even if it meant confronting his worst fears about the woman he had welcomed into his life, his home, and his heart. David's hands remained steady as he prepared for the evening ahead. Years of precision in accounting had taught him that emotional decisions led to errors. Tonight, he needed perfect execution. He maintained normal routines throughout the day, careful not to alert Sarah to his plans. They shared a pleasant lunch on the patio, discussed an upcoming community event, even made tentative plans for a weekend drive to Napa Valley. Plans David suspected were never meant to materialize. Sarah prepared his tea as usual, the ritual unchanged over 3 months. The delicate porcelain teapot that had been Margaret's, the honey in a small crystal jar, the cup and saucer arranged just so on a lacquered tray. When she stepped away to answer a text, David emptied the cup into the same plant he'd been using all week. The poor ficus was looking distinctly unhealthy, its leaves yellowing at the edges, confirming his suspicions about the tea's contents. "You seem distracted," Sarah observed, returning to find him staring at the cup. "Just tired," he replied, feigning a yawn. "The tea is helping, though. I'm already feeling drowsy." Her smile never reached her eyes. "Good. You need your rest." In bed, David performed a practiced routine, gradually slowing his breathing, letting his limbs go slack, allowing his mouth to fall slightly open. He'd researched how sedated sleep differed from natural sleep and mimicked the patterns: the deeper breathing, the occasional soft snore, the complete limpness of his arms when Sarah tested him. After 20 minutes, Sarah whispered, "David?" When he didn't respond, she gently shook his shoulder, then pinched the skin on the back of his hand, hard enough to leave a mark. Satisfied with his unconsciousness, she slid silently from the bed. Through barely open eyes, David watched as she moved to the corner of their bedroom. She knelt beside a section of hardwood flooring that looked identical to the rest, producing a small key from a chain around her neck. With practiced movements, she inserted the key into what appeared to be a normal floorboard seam and lifted. David fought to maintain his steady breathing as Sarah removed a metal box from beneath the floor. The hiding place was ingenious, a custom-built compartment that would be undetectable during normal cleaning or even a casual inspection of the room. She placed the box on the bed's edge, opening it with another key from the same chain. The box's contents made his blood run cold. Stacks of cash in various currencies, dollars, euros, pounds. Multiple passports with Sarah's photo but different names. Emma Lawson, Rebecca Wilson, Claire Thompson. Others he couldn't see clearly from his position. Credit cards in those same names. A small handgun with a silencer attachment. Most disturbing were photographs of older men, all with a similar appearance to David. Gray hair, glasses, professional demeanor. On the back of each photo, Dates and figures were meticulously noted in handwriting he recognized as Sarah's. Sarah rifled through the contents efficiently, extracting documents that appeared to be David's financial information. Statements from accounts he'd never shared with her, copies of his will and trust documents, even his Social Security card, which was supposed to be in the safe deposit box at the bank. She reviewed the papers, making notes in a small black book similar to David's own evidence journal. She then extracted a folder labeled DM Final and reviewed its contents. What appeared to be transfer authorizations for his investment accounts, already bearing signatures that looked remarkably like his own. David recognized sophisticated forgery when he saw it. In his career, he'd testified in cases involving document fraud. The quality of these forgeries would pass most cursory examinations. After 30 minutes, she carefully repacked everything, returned the box to its hiding place, and replaced the floorboard so seamlessly that David would have questioned whether the compartment existed at all if he hadn't just witnessed it. Without the knowledge of its existence, no one would ever detect the hidden storage space. Sarah slipped back into bed beside him, her breathing quickly settling into sleep. David remained motionless, his mind racing. The woman beside him was a stranger. Whatever her real name was, it wasn't Sarah Mitchell. The life they had built together, the memories, the routines, the future plans, all of it was fabrication designed for a single purpose: his exploitation and, apparently, his elimination. At the first light of dawn, David eased out of bed and dressed silently. He texted Benjamin, "Need to meet, now, usual place." Then he left a note for Sarah claiming an early breakfast meeting with former colleagues. Benjamin was waiting at the diner, 2 cups of coffee already on the table. One look at David's face told him everything. "You found something." David described the hidden box and its contents in precise detail. With each revelation, Benjamin's expression darkened. "This isn't just identity theft," Benjamin said grimly. "This sounds like a predator who targets older men." "The photos," David agreed. "They all looked like me. Different men, but the same type. Professional, older, recently widowed, from what I could tell from the notes." "We need to find out who she really is," Benjamin said, "and what happened to those other men." They formulated a plan. David would photograph the contents of the box at the first opportunity, documenting everything, just as he would have prepared evidence for a financial fraud case. Benjamin would run a background check on Sarah Mitchell through his security contacts. "Don't confront her," Benjamin warned. "If she's what I think she is, she's dangerous. These predators, they charm their way into the lives of vulnerable older adults, gain their trust, then disappear with everything." "Or worse," David said quietly, remembering the gun in the box. "She has a weapon, Benjamin, and those men in the photos, I got the distinct impression from her notes that they're not just previous marks. They're gone." Benjamin's hand tightened around his coffee cup. "All the more reason to approach this carefully. I'll stay close. Document everything, but be careful. Your safety comes first." David returned home to find Sarah preparing breakfast, her smile warm and inviting, as though she hadn't been examining forged documents of his financial accounts hours earlier. "There you are. How was your meeting?" "Productive," he replied, marveling at how ordinary his voice sounded while his world collapsed around him. "Former clients wanting retirement advice." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "They're lucky to have your expertise. I made your favorite, blueberry pancakes." David forced himself to eat, to smile, to maintain the facade of normalcy while silently calculating his next move. The woman across from him, this stranger wearing his wife's face, had planned something final for him. He had days, perhaps hours, to discover the truth before becoming another photograph in her collection. "I'm thinking of organizing my office today," he mentioned casually. "Some papers need filing." "Want help?" Sarah offered immediately. "No need," David replied, sipping his coffee. "You have your gallery shift. Besides, you know how particular I am about my filing system." Sarah laughed, the same warm laugh he'd found so charming for 6 years. "Your accountant's precision. I'll leave you to it then." The moment Sarah left for her supposed gallery job, David searched for the hidden compartment. Having seen Sarah access it, he located the nearly invisible keyhole disguised within the natural grain of the hardwood. Without the key, however, he couldn't open it without damaging the floor, which would immediately alert her. Instead, he searched the house methodically, starting with Sarah's private spaces. In her toiletry bag, he found the prescription bottle of Zaleplon, confirming she'd been drugging his tea. In her desk drawer, beneath seemingly innocent gallery paperwork, he discovered a notebook containing detailed observations of his daily routines, passwords he'd typed, account numbers she'd observed. Most disturbing was a timeline written in the same efficient handwriting that had annotated the photographs. Month 1 to 3, build trust, establish routines. Month 4 to 12, document finances, identify accounts. Year 1-2, integrate completely, obtain access to home/accounts. Year 3 to 5, monitor patterns, prepare documentation. Year 5 to 6, complete financial transfer preparations. Final phase, transfer, eliminate, exit. David stared at the last line, the clinical detachment of the words chilling him. He was in the final phase of whatever Sarah, or whoever she was, had planned. He photographed everything, sending the images to Benjamin with encrypted email. By the time Sarah returned home, all evidence of his search had been removed, and he was calmly working in his office as promised. That evening, Benjamin called with devastating news. "Sarah Mitchell doesn't exist before 6.5 years ago," he reported. "No birth certificate, no school records, nothing. But I found something else. The photograph you sent, one of those men is Caleb Parker. He disappeared in Seattle 3 years ago after marrying a woman who matches Sarah's description. His family filed reports, hired investigators, nothing, until 6 months ago, when a body was found." David closed his eyes. Cause of death: poison that mimicked natural causes, Zaleplon overdose, followed by injection of potassium chloride to stop the heart. Makes it look like cardiac arrest in an older man with no reason for suspicion. The same medication in his tea, the same fate planned for him. "There's more," Benjamin continued grimly. "I have a friend in law enforcement, Detective Parker, no relation to the victim. He wants to meet tomorrow." David agreed, the reality of his situation becoming clearer with each revelation. The stranger sleeping beside him wasn't just a thief. She was a killer who had perfected her methods through multiple victims, and he was next on her list. As he prepared for bed that night, watching Sarah brew the tea he would pretend to drink, David wondered how many other men had looked at this same woman with trust and affection in their final days. How many had accepted the bitter tea, never suspecting it was the beginning of the end. Detective Michael Parker didn't look like a typical police officer. In his 50s, with reading glasses perched on his nose and a tweed jacket that had seen better days, he resembled an English professor more than law enforcement. But his eyes were sharp, missing nothing as David and Benjamin sat across from him in a private office away from the police station. "Tell me everything again," he instructed David. "Every detail matters, no matter how small it seems." David recounted his discovery with the precision of an auditor presenting findings: the bitter tea, the sleeping medication, the hidden box, the photographs, the timeline. Detective Parker took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions about timing, specific documents, Sarah's routines. When David finished, the detective spread several files on the desk. "We've been tracking a pattern of missing men across 3 states," he explained, his voice matter-of-fact but grim. "All fitting a similar profile: widowers, financially secure, professional background, minimal family connections. All remarried within a year of losing their spouses. All disappeared, with accounts emptied, and new wives vanishing shortly after." He pushed forward a photograph. Caleb Parker, 68, retired engineer from Seattle, married a woman calling herself Emma Lawson 7 months after his wife died. Disappeared 3 years ago. The photo matched one David had seen in the hidden box. "We found his body buried in a remote area outside Portland 6 months ago. Cause of death was initially ruled natural, cardiac arrest. But the medical examiner found trace amounts of potassium chloride during toxicology. It's nearly undetectable if you're not looking for it, leaves the system quickly. An analyst doing a comparative study of unidentified remains noticed the pattern." Detective Parker showed another file. Thomas Grant, 70, former university administrator from Portland. Married Rebecca Wilson 8 months after becoming a widower, disappeared 4 years ago. Body found 2 years later, same M.O. David stared at the photos, each man bearing the same general appearance: gray hair, glasses, professional demeanor. Men like him. Men who thought they'd found companionship after loss, only to find predation instead. "There are at least 5 others we know of," the detective continued. "Different names for the wife each time, but the physical description matches. We believe it's the same woman." "Harper Allen," Benjamin interjected. "That's the earliest identity I could trace. Appears about 12 years ago, then disappears, replaced by new identities." Detective Parker nodded. "We believe that's her real name, or at least the first identity she established. We have a partial fingerprint match from the Parker crime scene, but not enough for court. We need solid evidence connecting her to these murders." "Like catching her with the poison," David said quietly. "Exactly." The detective leaned forward. "Mr. Mitchell, I understand this is difficult to hear, but based on the pattern, you're in immediate danger. The final stage usually occurs within days of the target noticing discrepancies, which you already have." David felt oddly calm. His accountant's mind was already calculating next steps, treating this like a complex audit that needed resolution. "You want to set up a sting operation." Detective Parker nodded. "We need to catch her in the act. That means surveillance equipment in your home and you wearing a wire. It's risky, but with proper preparation, we can protect you." "I'll do it," David said without hesitation. "Whatever it takes to stop her from doing this to someone else." They spent the next 2 hours planning. Benjamin would provide and install surveillance equipment disguised as ordinary household items: clock radios, light fixtures, even plant pots. Detective Parker would obtain warrants and position a team near David's home. David would maintain normal routines while gathering evidence. "Don't change anything that might alert her," Detective Parker warned. "These predators are hyper-aware of behavioral changes. The moment she suspects you know, she'll either flee or accelerate her timeline." "What's her typical method?" David asked, needing to understand what he faced. "Based on evidence from previous cases, she administers increasing doses of sedatives to establish a pattern of the victim sleeping deeply. Then, Once she has all financial information and transfer mechanisms in place, she administers a fatal overdose followed by potassium chloride injection. The death appears natural. An elderly man with a heart condition, nothing suspicious. David nodded, processing this information with analytical detachment. She's been increasing the dose. The tea tastes more bitter each night. Then we don't have much time, Detective Parker said grimly. Her financial preparations are likely complete. The final stage could happen any night now. As David prepared to leave, the detective added, "One more thing. Don't underestimate her. Harper Allen isn't just a con artist. She's a calculated killer who's evaded capture for years. She'll appear completely normal right until the end." Benjamin installed tiny cameras throughout David's house the next day while Sarah was at her supposed gallery job. The devices were virtually undetectable, hidden in everyday objects that wouldn't draw attention. "I will monitor everything remotely," Benjamin assured him, demonstrating the system on his tablet. "Detective Parker's team will be watching 24/7, and I'll be nearby. The moment anything happens, we move in." David showed Benjamin the hiding spot for the metal box. "I need to see what's inside again. Document everything properly." "Too risky without her key," Benjamin advised. "Let's focus on catching her with the poison. That's all we need." They reviewed the plan one final time before Benjamin left. David would maintain his routine, including pretending to drink the drug tea. He would wear the wire Detective Parker provided, hidden beneath his clothing. The surveillance team would monitor everything, ready to intervene the moment Harper moved to harm him. "I still think you should stay with me," Benjamin said before leaving. "It's not worth the risk." "If I disappear now, she'll know something's wrong," David replied. "She'll vanish, find another victim. This ends with me." That evening, Sarah announced she had planned something special for the following night. "A celebration," she explained, her smile warm as always. "For your retirement. I've invited no one, just us. I'm cooking your favorite meal." David maintained his pleasant expression while his stomach turned to ice. "That sounds wonderful. What's the occasion?" "Does there need to be one?" Sarah touched his arm affectionately. "Life is short. We should celebrate while we can." The double meaning wasn't lost on David. Tomorrow night was when she planned to act, when she intended to end his life. Later, in the bathroom where cameras couldn't see, he texted Benjamin, "Tomorrow night. She's planning it for tomorrow night." The response came immediately. "All systems in place. Detective Parker is accelerating everything. Be ready." That night, David lay beside the woman who planned to kill him, listening to her steady breathing, wondering how many other men had done the same in their final hours. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, he felt a strange, cold clarity. Tomorrow, one way or another, this would end. David awoke with newfound purpose. If today might be his last, he would ensure it ended differently than Harper Allen expected. He performed his morning routine with methodical precision, cataloging each familiar action that now felt surreal under the circumstances. The simple act of shaving, of selecting a tie, of organizing his desk, all carried new significance. These mundane tasks might be his last, or they might be the beginning of justice for multiple victims who never saw the danger until it was too late. "You seem chipper," Sarah observed over breakfast, watching him with that same warm smile that had once brought him comfort. "Looking forward to our special dinner," David replied, returning her smile with practiced ease. "What can I do to help prepare?" "Nothing. It's my gift to you. Just be ready at 7. She squeezed his hand affectionately, her touch lingering. "Wear that blue shirt I love, the one from our anniversary trip to Carmel." The shirt had been a gift from her on that trip, their second anniversary. David wondered now if she'd been calculating even then how much longer she would need to maintain the charade. How many more anniversaries before she could complete her final phase? Perfect choice, he agreed. The shirt had been a gift from her on that trip, their second anniversary. David wondered now if she'd been calculating even then how much longer she would need to maintain the charade. How many more anniversaries before she could complete her final phase? Perfect choice, he agreed. David spent the day making subtle preparations. He moved certain financial documents to new locations, leaving decoys behind. Detective Parker had advised him to create small disruptions in Harper's expected environment, not enough to raise alarms, but enough to potentially reveal her reactions on camera. If she's as meticulous as we believe, she'll check her resources before making her final move, the detective had explained. We want to see where she looks, what she prioritizes. David rearranged items in his desk drawer, placing an outdated password list where his current one would normally be. He shifted account statements, hiding the most recent ones in a folder labeled Tax Records 2015, a place she'd likely overlook. Small disruptions in her carefully constructed plan that might force her to reveal more than she intended. Benjamin texted regular confirmations that the surveillance system was functioning perfectly. Detective Parker's team had taken positions in vacant apartments with sight lines to David's home, an unmarked van parked down the street that contained their command center. The officers would monitor every room in real time, ready to intervene at the first sign of danger. Remember, Benjamin's final text read, don't try to be a hero. The moment you feel unsafe, use the panic word, and we move in immediately. The panic word, Margaret, would bring immediate intervention. David hoped it wouldn't come to that. He wanted Harper to reveal everything, to provide irrefutable evidence linking her to the other victims. At precisely 6:45 that evening, David showered and dressed in the requested blue shirt. In the bathroom, he attached the tiny wire Detective Parker had provided, concealed beneath his undershirt. A nearly invisible earpiece allowed the detective to communicate with him if necessary. Testing, testing, he whispered, adjusting the device as he stood before the mirror. Coming through clear, Detective Parker's voice responded in his ear. Remember, we need her explicit confession or direct evidence of attempted murder. Keep her talking once she shows her hand. Sarah, or rather Harper, had transformed the dining room when David descended the stairs. Candles cast a warm glow over the table. Fine china gleamed in the flickering light. Wine glasses polished to a brilliant shine. The effort she'd put into creating this romantic setting for what she intended as his last meal was chilling in its calculated perfection. This looks wonderful, David said, genuinely impressed by her attention to detail. Only the best for you. She kissed his cheek, lingering a moment too long. Wine? I've opened that Cabernet you loved from Napa. The evening progressed with perfect normalcy. Harper served an excellent meal, his favorite salmon with dill sauce, prepared exactly as he liked it. They discussed inconsequential topics: neighborhood news, gallery exhibitions, retirement plans. Anyone observing would see only a loving couple enjoying an intimate dinner. To 6 wonderful years, Harper offered a toast, raising her glass. And to many more. The lie hung between them as David clinked his glass against hers. To the future, he replied, watching her eyes for any flicker of conscience. There was none. After dessert, a flawless creme brulee, Harper brought out his nightly tea. Something special tonight, a new chamomile blend I found at that specialty shop on Union Street. It pairs well with this. She produced a small box of chocolates, imported from Switzerland, a little indulgence to end a perfect evening. David sipped the tea carefully. The bitter taste was stronger than ever, barely masked by honey and lemon. He set down the cup, pretending to enjoy it, while actually consuming very little. "The chocolates are wonderful," he said, eating one while palming another beneath his napkin. "You've thought of everything." Harper watched him closely, her expression warm, but her eyes calculating. "You deserve to be taken care of, David. After everything you've been through, losing Margaret, working so hard all those years." As the evening continued, David pretended increasing drowsiness, slurring his words slightly, blinking heavily. He allowed his posture to slump, his responses to become delayed. "You look exhausted," Harper observed right on cue. "Let's get you to bed. Bring your tea. It'll help you sleep." Upstairs, David allowed her to help him into bed, his movements deliberately clumsy. He sipped the tea occasionally, always careful to limit actual consumption while appearing to drink. "So tired," he murmured, setting the nearly full cup on the nightstand. "Don't know why I'm so exhausted." "Rest," Harper said softly, stroking his hair with what appeared to be genuine affection. "I'll join you soon." David closed his eyes, controlling his breathing as he had practiced, keeping it deep and regular. Within minutes, he heard Harper testing his consciousness, calling his name softly, touching his shoulder, even pinching his arm lightly. When he didn't respond, she waited another 15 minutes before moving. Through barely open eyes, David watched her retrieve the key from around her neck and access the hidden compartment. She removed the metal box and placed it on the bed, opening it efficiently. "All systems operational," Detective Parker whispered in David's ear. "We're recording everything. Keep still until she makes her move." Harper removed several documents from the box, papers David recognized as his financial information. She reviewed them methodically, checking details against notes in her small black book. Her expression flickered with annoyance when she couldn't locate one of the account statements David had hidden earlier. "Where did you put it?" she muttered, returning to search through his desk. Finding the decoy password list, she frowned. "These are old. Where are the current ones?" Her frustration was brief but revealing, a crack in her composed facade. After several minutes of searching, she returned to the metal box, apparently deciding to proceed without the missing documents. She reached deeper into the box and extracted a small leather case. Inside was a syringe and a vial of clear liquid. "Target has potential weapon." Detective Parker's voice was tense in David's ear. "Stand by." Harper filled the syringe carefully, holding it up to the dim light to check for air bubbles. Her movements were practiced, clinical, the actions of someone who had performed this procedure multiple times before. She returned to David's side, setting the syringe on the nightstand while checking his pulse at his wrist. "Still too strong," she murmured to herself. "Need to wait for full sedation." She returned to the box, extracting a phone David had never seen before. She dialed quickly. "It's me," she said quietly. "Everything's on schedule." He sedated. "I'll administer the final dose within the hour, then wait until morning to report finding him." She paused, listening. "Yes, the transfer documents are all prepared. I'll initiate the first movements tomorrow after the paramedics leave. Yes, I've already packed essentials. 3 days maximum before I disappear." She ended the call, returning to check David's pulse again. "Almost there," she said with clinical satisfaction. "Just a few more minutes." Detective Parker's voice was calm in David's ear. "We have enough. Initiate the confrontation when ready." David waited until Harper picked up the syringe again, uncapping the needle with practiced efficiency. Then he opened his eyes fully and sat up. "That won't be necessary, Harper." Harper Allen froze, the syringe halfway to David's arm. For a split second, genuine shock registered on her face, the first authentic emotion he'd seen from her in 6 years. Then her expression smoothed, though the syringe remained in her hand. "David, you're awake." Her voice conveyed concern, but her eyes calculated escape routes. "What did you call me?" "Harper Allen. That is your real name, isn't it? Though you've used many others. Emma Lawson, Rebecca Wilson." David kept his voice calm, noting how she positioned herself between him and the door. "I know about the sleeping medication in my tea. I know about the men in the photographs." Harper's expression shifted subtly, assessment replacing shock. She lowered the syringe, but didn't set it down. "You're confused, darling. You've been having these paranoid episodes lately. Remember how we discussed seeing Dr. Levine about your memory? I think we need to make that appointment sooner than we planned." "I'm not confused," David replied, nodding toward the open metal box. "I know what you've been doing. I know about Caleb Parker." The name struck home. Harper's facade cracked further, her grip tightening on the syringe. "You've been in my things." Her voice hardened, the loving wife persona evaporating. "Going through my private property." "Like you've been going through mine while I slept?" David maintained eye contact, aware that Detective Parker's team was watching, waiting for the right moment. "The difference is, I wasn't planning to kill you." Harper's expression turned calculating. She set down the syringe, not too far from reach, and adopted a seductive smile. "David, whatever you think you know, we can work this out." "We've had 6 good years together." "6 years of lies," David corrected. "How many others were there before me? Caleb Parker, Thomas Grant. How many men have you married and murdered, Harper?" Her eyes narrowed at the mention of multiple victims. "You've been investigating me." It wasn't a question. "The authorities know everything," David said, watching her glance toward the syringe, the door, the window, calculating odds, planning escape routes. "They know about the poison, the identities, the pattern." Harper's expression hardened completely, the mask falling away to reveal the cold predator beneath. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "I think I do. A woman who targets vulnerable older men, marries them, empties their accounts, and disappears after making their deaths look natural. How am I doing so far?" Her laugh held no warmth. "You were supposed to be the easiest one yet, a lonely old man so grateful for attention." She shook her head. "Do you have any idea how pathetic you were after your precious Margaret died, following me around the support group like a lost puppy?" David felt a flicker of pain at the mockery of his grief, but kept his expression neutral. "Tell me about the others," he prompted, Detective Parker's voice in his ear urging him to keep her talking. "Tell me about Caleb." Something shifted in Harper's demeanor. Pride, perhaps, or the relief of finally dropping the pretense. "Men like you are all the same, so predictable, so trusting once you think you're in love." She gestured dismissively. "Pathetic, really. After losing your precious first wives, you're so desperate for companionship, you ignore every red flag." "How do you choose them?" "Widowers with assets and no close family," Harper explained with clinical detachment. "Professional men who live quietly, maintain good credit, and have substantial retirement savings. The kind no one checks on regularly." She began to pace, keeping the distance between them controlled, her movements reminiscent of a predator circling. "I look for men with routine. Men who keep their finances organized, makes it easier to find everything. Men who are respected but not highly visible in their communities." The sweet spot is between 1 and 2 years after losing their wives, still grieving but desperate to feel normal again. David maintained his calm exterior while she revealed her methodology, how she created false identities, how she researched potential targets through obituaries and retirement announcements, how she engineered chance meetings at grief support groups or community events frequented by seniors. "And then you kill them," David stated flatly. Harper shrugged, the gesture incongruously casual given the subject. A necessary final step. The sedatives increase gradually, establishing a pattern of deep sleep that explains why they don't wake during cardiac arrest. Potassium chloride stops the heart without leaving obvious traces unless someone specifically looks for it, which they rarely do for elderly men with no suspicious circumstances. "How many?" "You would have been number 8. Her tone was matter-of-fact. "I've been doing this for 12 years. You're the first to catch on. Congratulations." "We've got everything we need," Detective Parker's voice confirmed in David's ear. "Keep her talking while we move in." Harper must have noticed something in David's expression or caught a flicker of his eyes, responding to the voice in his ear. She suddenly lunged toward the nightstand, grabbing the syringe. "They're listening right now, aren't they?" she hissed, backing toward the hidden box. "You're wearing a wire." "It's over, Harper," David said calmly. "The police know everything. It's not over until I say it's over." She grabbed the box, clutching it to her chest. "I have connections you can't imagine. New identities ready to go. This isn't the first time I've had to disappear quickly." "They already know about the box," David told her. "Everything in it. The passports, the IDs, the photos of your victims." Harper's eyes darted around the room, looking for surveillance devices, her composure cracking further. "You think you're so clever. You have no idea who I'm connected to. This isn't over." The sound of the front door opening downstairs made her freeze. Detective Parker's voice came clearly from below. "Police! Harper Allen! We have a warrant for your arrest." Harper bolted toward the bedroom window. As she fumbled with the lock, the bedroom door burst open. 2 officers entered with weapons drawn, Detective Parker behind them. "Harper Allen, you're under arrest for the murder of Caleb Parker and Thomas Grant," Detective Parker announced. "Step away from the window and put down the box and syringe." For a moment, Harper looked as if she might still attempt escape, or worse, use the syringe as a weapon. Then her shoulders slumped minutely, the calculation in her eyes shifting to a new strategy. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding," she said, her voice suddenly trembling with fabricated fear. "My husband has been experiencing paranoid delusions. I was only trying to help him." "Save it," Detective Parker said, nodding to the officers who moved forward to handcuff her. "We have your entire confession on tape, plus the syringe that I'm willing to bet contains potassium chloride, matching what was found in Caleb Parker's body." As the officers secured Harper, one carefully took possession of the syringe and box as evidence. Detective Parker turned to David. "You did well, Mr. Mitchell." "Kept your head under incredible pressure." David watched as Harper was led from the room, her cold eyes locked on his until the last moment. Her final words chilled him, despite the warmth of the bedroom. "You were nothing but a convenient target, a boring old man with money. You meant nothing." David straightened his shoulders, meeting her gaze steadily. "And you underestimated an old accountant who pays attention to details." After Harper was taken away, Detective Parker explained the next steps. Statements to be given, evidence to be processed, a long legal journey ahead. The house would need to be thoroughly searched for additional evidence linking Harper to her previous victims. "We'll need access for several days," he explained. "Do you have somewhere you can stay?" Benjamin, who had arrived shortly after the police, placed a hand on David's shoulder. "He's staying with me, for as long as needed." As dawn broke over San Francisco, David packed a small bag with essentials. And the home he'd shared with Harper, he could no longer think of her as Sarah, felt foreign now, contaminated by 6 years of lies. He paused at a photograph of them on the mantel, taken on their second anniversary. Her smile, once so warm and reassuring, now seemed predatory, her arm around his shoulders, possessive rather than affectionate. "Anything else you need from here?" Benjamin asked. David shook his head. "Nothing I can't replace." As they walked to the door, David glanced back at the living room, the sofa where they'd shared countless evenings, the kitchen where she'd prepared his drugged tea, the dining room where just hours earlier she'd served what was meant to be his last meal. 6 years, he murmured. How did I not see it? Benjamin squeezed his shoulder. Because she was a professional, and in the end, you're the one who caught her. David nodded, turning away from the photograph without regret. Let's go. The first weeks after Harper's arrest passed in a blur of police statements, evidence cataloging, and legal consultations. David stayed in Benjamin's guest room, unable to return to the house filled with false memories and hidden dangers. Each new revelation about Harper Allen's crimes deepened his understanding of how narrowly he had escaped becoming her latest victim. We've connected her to 7 murders conclusively, Detective Parker informed him during a follow-up meeting. Fingerprints on items in the box match partial prints from multiple crime scenes. The potassium chloride in the syringe is identical to traces found in Caleb Parker's system. The financial documentation shows a clear pattern of systematic theft, following the same timeline in each case. The detective spread photographs across the table. 7 men, all bearing striking resemblances to David. Gray hair, glasses, professional demeanor, all now confirmed dead. She'll never see freedom again, Parker continued. The district attorney is pursuing multiple murder charges with special circumstances. No possibility of parole. David nodded, processing this information with the same analytical detachment that had helped him survive. And the families. Do they know? We're contacting them all. Several have asked to speak with you when you're ready, especially Caleb Parker's parents. They've waited 3 years for answers. That evening, David sat alone in Benjamin's living room, surrounded by the paperwork of his dismantled life. The house would need to be sold. He could never live there again. Financial accounts required changing, passwords updating, identity theft protections implemented. The practicalities provided welcome distraction from deeper questions that haunted his quieter moments. How had he not seen it? 6 years of marriage to a complete stranger. 6 years of believing he'd found genuine connection after losing Margaret. 6 years of lying beside a woman who was calculating his death. Benjamin found him staring blankly at the wall, a cold cup of coffee forgotten in his hand. "Stop torturing yourself," his friend said firmly, taking the cup and replacing it with a glass of scotch. She was a professional predator. She'd been perfecting her technique for years before she met you. I invited her into my life, David said quietly. I gave her access to everything, my home, my accounts, my memories of Margaret. And in the end, you're the one who caught her, Benjamin reminded him. Your attention to detail, your methodical mind, the very things she thought made you an easy target, ultimately brought her down. The investigation uncovered the full extent of Harper's operation. She maintained multiple identities, each with its own bank accounts, credit cards, and documentation. She had connections to document forgers, identity thieves, and a network that helped her disappear and resurface with new personas. Most disturbing were the detailed notebooks outlining her methodology, target selection criteria, manipulation techniques, methods for gaining financial access, and step-by-step procedures for elimination that would appear natural. "It's the most systematic approach to predation I've ever seen," Detective Parker told David. "She treated it like a business, complete with timelines, profit projections, and risk management strategies." 3 months after Harper's arrest, David began seeing Dr. Melissa Chen, a therapist specializing in survivors of exploitation and betrayal trauma. Their sessions helped him navigate the complex emotions of betrayal. "What troubles you most?" Dr. Chen asked during one session. David considered the question carefully. "That I couldn't tell? That everything, every moment, every conversation, every intimate moment was calculated performance." "She was a sociopath," Dr. Chen said gently. "They're extraordinarily good at mimicking normal human connection without actually feeling it. Your inability to detect that doesn't reflect on you. It reflects on how profoundly abnormal her psychology is." "I keep wondering if there were signs I missed," David admitted. "Moments when the mask slipped. Even if there were, you had no context for interpreting them," Dr. Chen pointed out. "We interpret behavior through our own emotional framework. You're capable of love, empathy, genuine connection, so you assumed she was too." Gradually, David began rebuilding. He sold the San Francisco house, donating furniture and belongings that carried too many false memories. He found a smaller place in San Diego, a fresh start in a city with no associations to either Margaret or Harper. The ocean view and warmer climate helped ease the persistent chill he'd felt since discovering Harper's true nature. 6 months after the arrest, David received a call from an FBI agent named Samantha Wells. "We're building a comprehensive case file on Harper Allen for prosecution," she explained. "Your documentation was exceptional, the most thorough evidence any victim has ever provided. Would you be willing to consult with our team on other cases involving predators who target older adults?" The request surprised David. "I'm an accountant, not a law enforcement expert." "Exactly," Agent Wells replied. "You approach this from a different angle, systematic, detail-oriented, financial. Your perspective could help us identify patterns we might miss. And frankly, your experience gives you insights our agents lack." David agreed to meet with the FBI's Victim Services Division. What began as a consultation evolved into regular volunteer work. He found himself reviewing case files, identifying financial patterns, and eventually speaking to support groups of older adults, particularly those re-entering the dating world after losing spouses. He shared warning signs, protective strategies, and the importance of maintaining independent friendships even when building new relationships. "The most dangerous predators don't appear dangerous," he would tell these groups. "They study what you need, companionship, validation, care, and become exactly that." The work gave him purpose, transforming his trauma into protection for others. Each time he helped identify warning signs or financial irregularities in a case, he felt a small measure of justice, not just for himself, but for Caleb Parker and the others who hadn't survived Harper's predation. Meeting Caleb's elderly parents proved particularly meaningful. Robert and Eleanor Parker had spent 3 years searching for answers about their son's disappearance. "We knew something was wrong," Eleanor told David over tea in their Seattle home. "Caleb would never have just vanished without contacting us. But no one believed us when we said his new wife seemed off. They thought we were just being overprotective, Robert added. Or that we didn't want him moving on after losing Sharon. David nodded, understanding both perspectives. It's hard to see clearly when grief and hope are tangled together. You're the only one who can truly understand what Caleb experienced, Eleanor said, grasping David's hand. And the only one who stopped her. 1 year after Harper's arrest and conviction, David sat on the balcony of his San Diego apartment, preparing notes for a presentation at a conference on financial exploitation of seniors. The evening news played in the background, reporting Harper Allen's sentencing to life imprisonment without possibility of parole for multiple counts of murder, fraud, and identity theft. David listened without emotion. Harper had become an abstract concept to him now, a case study rather than the woman he'd believed was his loving wife. The bitter taste of betrayal had faded, replaced by the satisfaction of purpose. His phone rang, Benjamin calling for their weekly check-in. "Saw the news?" Benjamin said without preamble. "You okay?" "I'm fine," David replied, surprised to realize it was true. "Actually, I'm better than fine. I'm preparing for that conference in Phoenix next week." "The FBI one. They're lucky to have you." David smiled, watching the sunset paint the ocean gold. "I'm the lucky one. Not many people get a second chance at purpose after retirement." After they hung up, David prepared his evening tea, a ritual he had reclaimed from Harper's weaponization. The chamomile tasted as it should, soothing, clean, honest, no bitter aftertaste, no hidden danger. His reflection journal lay open beside him, a therapeutic practice Dr. Chen had suggested. Today's entry was brief but significant. 1 year later. The woman who tried to destroy me instead gave me an unexpected gift, a new mission. The ledgers of my life finally balance again. In helping others identify predators, I've found meaning that even Harper can't take away. As darkness fell, David Mitchell, accountant, survivor, advocate, allowed himself to feel something he had thought lost forever after Harper's betrayal: hope. Not just for himself, but for others who might now be spared because of what he had learned at such cost. The broken pieces of his life had formed new patterns, stronger for having been tested, more valuable for the wisdom etched into each fragment. The bitter taste of betrayal taught me that trust is not foolish. Betrayal is the fault of the betrayer, not the one who had the courage to trust again after loss. Those small inconsistencies I noticed, a bitter tea, disturbed belongings, unexplained drowsiness, weren't signs of aging or paranoia, but my lifetime of experience sending warning signals I almost ignored. In life's final chapters, our greatest protection isn't isolation, but connection, not with just one person who could become everything, but with a community that provides both support and perspective. Benjamin's friendship saved my life as surely as my own attention to detail. The network of people we cultivate throughout our lives becomes our safety net when we're most vulnerable. My accounting precision, which Harper dismissed as the fussiness of an old man, became the very tool that documented her deception and protected others from her predation. The skills we develop throughout our careers don't abandon us in retirement. They transform into shields against those who would take advantage of our experience, our resources, and our hearts. The most powerful response to those who would diminish our worth is to transform our pain into protection for others, ensuring that wisdom, rather than victimhood, becomes our legacy. Each time I speak to a group of seniors about protecting themselves, each time I help law enforcement identify patterns of exploitation, Harper's attempt to make me another anonymous victim further fades. Trust your instincts about small details that seem wrong. Maintain independent friendships, even in new relationships. Remember that the skills you've honed throughout your life, attention to detail, systematic thinking, pattern recognition, aren't just professional tools, but personal shields against those who would exploit vulnerability. The ledgers of a life well lived will always balance in the end, if we have the courage to audit them honestly and the wisdom to share what we find. Sometimes the bitter taste is exactly what saves us.